Chapter 1. The Silence Before Song. The forest had fallen into an unnatural hush. Athel Loren, vast and ancient, was never truly quiet. Its branches whispered with the voices of spirits, of creatures brushing through brush and root, of hidden things watching from between mossy trunks. But now, as dusk seeped into the canopy like ink, even the birds dared not call. Not a chitter, nor rustle, nor breath. Just the sharp, stifling silence, pregnant with warning. Athel stood at the edge of Lithay's hollow, bare feet pressed into the cool soil. The sacred glade was veiled in mist, tendrils of pale silver coiling between the gnarled oaks like the breath of something dreaming. Or dying. She felt it again, that pull. It tugged at her spirit like a thread woven from moonlight and sorrow, dragging her thoughts deeper into the roots of the forest beyond sense and song. Her fingers trembled as they traced the carved oaken staff she bore, an heirloom of her house, shaped from the limb of a once-living treeman who had given his final breath in the War of the Bleeding Thorns. She had heard the stories, whispers in the bark, old songs humming in the glades. The dreaming realm was stirring, and it wanted her. "Nay, Arith," came a voice, soft as falling leaves. The Spellsinger turned. Drellin, the blind seer, emerged from the mist like a phantom. His eyes, clouded white and veined like marble, saw more than sight could give. His antlered helm marked him as one of the elder guides, those who once danced with spirits before fading into whispers themselves. "You heard it," she said, not as a question. Drellin nodded slowly. "Even the roots shiver. You are called. You must go." Nerith's throat tightened. "To where?" He raised a gnarled hand and pointed behind her, to the heart of the hollow where the veil was thinnest. A stone altar sat crooked between two ancient trees, slick with moss and ancient blood. Upon it lay a single silvered feather, the mark of Scytha, the keeper of dreams. "It begins now. There is no more waiting." The staff felt heavier in her grip as she approached. Her heart pounded, thudding like a war drum in her ears. The glade pulsed with power, every tree leaning in, listening, watching. She knelt. With a breath, she began the ritual. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied, rising in a melodic chant, woven with the high tongue of the Sylvaneth and her own people's harmonics. Green light gathered around her in spiraling threads, drawn from bark and leaf and soil. The very air thickened, trembling with anticipation. Then it changed. The wind screamed through the glade like a dying beast. The trees groaned as though in agony. Shadows tore themselves from the trunks, and from them rose them, wraiths of the forest's forgotten sins. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths gaping voids, filled with roots and rot. One bore the face of a once-loved warrior, half-eaten by vines. Another dragged the broken shell of a deer's skull along its twisted spine. They came without sound, slithering over moss like smoke made flesh. Nerith's chant faltered. She leapt to her feet as one of the wraiths lunged. Its limbs cracked like breaking twigs as it closed in, its claws more spirit than flesh but no less deadly. Slash. A searing pain ripped across her side as its talons grazed her ribs. Blood spilled in warm rivulets down her flank. The trees did nothing. They only watched. Snarling, she thrust her staff forward and unleashed a surge of verdant magic. Vines exploded from the ground, barbed and hungry, lashing around the spectre. It screamed, not in pain but rage, before the vines crushed it into silence. But more followed. Nerith spun, singing the next spell into existence. Lances of thorned light burst from her fingertips, piercing 3 of the wraiths through their hollow chests. They collapsed, dissolving into ash and memory. And still they came. "Enough!" she roared, voice cracked and desperate. "You will not take me!" The earth itself responded. A ring of ancient roots erupted around her, forming a cocoon of twisting bark. The ritual completed with a final pulse, a note so pure, so clear, it seemed to pierce the veil between life and dream. The glade vanished in a flash of blinding emerald. And then silence. Nerith opened her eyes. The world around her was no longer Athel Loren. It was something older, something deeper. The forest dreamt, and she was inside it. Chapter 2. The Rite of Weaving. Darkness breathed like a living thing. Nerith floated, weightless, suspended in a space where neither time nor form held dominion. All around her a swirling void churned, deep greens and midnight blues folding into each other like smoke in water. The air pulsed with the heartbeat of the forest, not the forest of bark and boughs, but the one beneath, the soul of Athel Loren. Then the ground found her. With a violent snap, Nerith slammed into the earth. She cried out, her ribs ablaze from the gash left by the wraith's talons. Soil caked her skin, wet and cold. She gasped, fingers digging into the moss as if clinging to reality. She sat up. The dream reel had form now. The hollow had twisted. Trees rose like titans, impossibly tall and wrong, limbs too many, bark shifting with faces that whispered in silence. Light poured from nowhere and everywhere at once, a diffuse golden mist that made her skin itch. Leaves the size of shields drifted down lazily, each etched with glowing runes in a language she didn't know but felt in her bones. A voice pierced the stillness. "Your blood has marked you. You cannot turn back." Nerith turned, staff raised, breath ragged. Scytha stood among the trees, if what stood could still be called a dryad. Her form was fluid, her limbs growing and receding like the tide. Bark and petal fused in elegant chaos. Her face was beautiful and terrible, eyes vast pools of emerald flame. Her voice was neither male nor female, neither whisper nor roar, but both at once. "You sought truth," Scytha said. "You sang the song, now the forest will answer." Nerith staggered to her feet, wiping blood from her side. "Why attack me? Why send those things?" "They were you," the spirit answered. "Your fear, your doubt, the rot beneath your bark. Before you journey forward, you must be stripped of falsehood. I nearly died, and yet you live." Scytha stepped forward. Each movement reshaped her, branches curling and uncurling like breathing lungs. "It is time to weave your spirit anew." The glade shifted. The ground cracked open, revealing a spiral of roots descending into darkness. Without waiting, Scytha stepped into the void. Nerith followed, her breath shallow, her body still aching. The descent felt eternal. Whispering voices buzzed in her ears, some her own, others alien, fragmented memories clinging to the air like ash. At the bottom, a circle of ancient stones awaited. Each was etched with glowing runes, bleeding sap that shimmered gold. In the center stood a withered sapling, twisted and blackened, its bark split and bleeding. A pitiful thing, but pulsing with latent power. Scytha gestured. "This is your soul made manifest, withered by fear, cracked by doubt. You must weave it anew." Nerith approached, hesitating. The sapling throbbed like a wound. As she reached out, pain exploded in her skull. Visions tore through her mind. She saw herself standing in a burning forest, a crown of thorns atop her head, her hands soaked in blood not her own. She saw herself as a corpse, roots piercing her chest, face twisted in agony. She saw herself laughing as Athel Loren burned behind her. "No," she whispered, backing away. Zaida's voice thundered. "Face it! Weave it!" Naita screamed and plunged her staff into the soil beside the sapling. Magic surged through her, raw, furious. She sang the rite of weaving, voice rising into a scream. Light poured from her mouth, from her skin, from her very bones. The sapling trembled, cracked, split, and from within a new branch emerged, green, pure, alive. But the old bark did not vanish. It blackened, burned, and then fell away in flakes, screaming as it died. Blood sprayed from the base of the tree, thick and steaming, soaking Neareth's legs. The ground shook. The vision faded. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The sapling now stood tall, vibrant with green flame. Its roots reached for her, curling around her wrists like a child's hands. Scytha knelt beside her, gentler now. "You have begun the rite. You are no longer who you were." Neareth looked at her hands. They glowed faintly, patterns of vines and runes now etched into her skin. "My thread in the forest's tapestry," Scytha said, "and soon a needle." The glade dissolved again, fading into golden mist. Naita slept, but the forest did not. Chapter 3. Into the Veil of Mist. Neareth awoke, gasping. She lay sprawled across a floor of leaves, not ordinary leaves, but massive, translucent things that pulsed with dim green light. Above her, the sky shimmered like oil on water, clouds drifting backward in slow reverse, as if time itself were forgetting how to flow. Her robes were torn. The blood had dried to a crust on her ribs, and the carved staff, her only anchor to the waking world, lay beside her, humming faintly with residual magic. She had crossed, not merely fallen asleep or touched the border, but stepped fully into the dreaming wood. It welcomed her with silence. The trees here were impossibly tall, stretching out into spirals rather than straight lines. Their trunks bore no bark, only slick surfaces etched with living memories. As she stumbled upright, the tree nearest to her exhaled, literally exhaled. Its surface swelled and released a gust of breath, warm and thick with scent. Pine, ash, old sorrow. She stepped cautiously between the trunks, each one pulsing with a low heartbeat. Her own pulse began to sync with them, rhythm merging with rhythm. Then came the whispers, faint at first, like insects beneath the skin, then louder, persistent. Words spoken in tones both urgent and ancient. "She comes, singer of the broken song. Bone and bark, one must yield." Neareth gripped her staff tighter, pressing forward through the shifting foliage. The ground wasn't earth, but interwoven roots, slick, writhing, alive. Each step drew a muffled thrum, like she walked across the spine of a giant beast dreaming beneath her. A shape emerged through the mist. At first, it was nothing more than a shadow moving between trees. Then it came closer, tall, elegant, but wrong in the joints, too many elbows. Legs that bent and unbent like a deer that had never learned to walk properly. Then she saw the face. It was an elf. Or once was. The flesh was stretched like parchment, skin pulled so tight it cracked at the corners. The eyes glowed white, pupils long consumed. Antlers jutted from its skull, twisted into unnatural spirals. The mouth opened and closed in rhythm with her breath, though it made no sound. Neareth halted. The figure moved in tandem, left as she stepped right, closer when she retreated. It was a mirror of her soul, or a predator playing mimic. "What are you?" she asked, voice hoarse. The creature smiled, a jagged, broken thing. Then it attacked. It moved like wind snapping through the trees, arms whipping forward with claws of bark and bone. Nearith barely ducked as one hand slashed past her face, carving deep into the trunk behind her. Sap erupted like blood, hot and red, and the tree screamed. An actual human scream that echoed through the woods. She rolled to the side and sang a note of war. Her staff flared with green fire, and vines burst from the ground. They wrapped around the creature's limbs, slowing it but not stopping it. He turned its head unnaturally, jaw dislocating with a wet crack. From its throat came a gurgling chorus of voices, all speaking at once. You must fail. You must fall. You are not enough. Nerith screamed back, a raw, defiant sound. She hurled her staff like a spear. It struck the creature in the chest and exploded in a blossom of emerald flame. The thing howled, body convulsing. Its skin split. Roots erupted from its mouth, writhing like worms. It collapsed into the root floor, dragged down screaming by unseen forces. Silence returned. She retrieved her staff, hands shaking. The wood was scorched, blackened, but whole. Her breathing came ragged, lungs burning. She turned to go, only to find the forest had changed again. Now before her lay a clearing of glassy water. Floating above it, suspended mid-air, was a creature unlike any she had ever seen. A great hound, ethereal and sleek, fur shimmering like starlight over deep water. Its eyes glowed with knowing light. It did not snarl or posture. It simply waited. Nerith approached slowly, reverently. "You are the guide," she whispered. The hound lowered its head in assent. Then it spoke, not with a mouth, but directly into her mind. "I am Merelt, the dream guide. I was once sung into being by the first Spellsingers to walk this forest. You are bound to me, now." Nerith dropped to one knee, not in obedience, but understanding. What lies ahead? The hound's gaze flickered toward the horizon, where the mist swirled violently. The past, the bones of Athel Loren's birth. The truth the forest hides from even itself. If you continue, you will be changed. Nerith touched the blood at her ribs, tasted iron and ash. I was already changed. Merelt turned, and then fall. Together, they stepped into the rising mist, vanishing into the first memory of the forest's ancient soul. Chapter 4. The Echoes of Ancient Blood. The mist swallowed everything. Nerith moved in silence, Merelt gliding beside her like a specter of light, paws leaving no mark on the twisted roots below. The world had shifted again, less dream now, more memory. The forest didn't breathe so much as remember, and it remembered in pain. Shapes stirred within the fog. Shadows writhed in the corners of her vision, too large, too wrong. Groans echoed faintly, the groans of trees and something more human. The air grew heavier, thick with the metallic tang of blood and the dry, scorched scent of war. It clung to her tongue and curled in her lungs. Then the fog broke. Nairi stumbled forward into a clearing not touched by time, not truly. This place was a memory, frozen and alive. The sky was crimson, dark clouds roiling above, raining ash instead of rain. A battlefield spread before her, vast and grotesque, bodies strewn like broken dolls, armor cracked open like eggshells, blood soaking into roots that squirmed to drink it. Elves. Spirits. Beasts of bark and claw. It was Athel Loren's war-born past, made flesh. She fell to her knees, overwhelmed. The screams were still echoing, fresh. The trees here were blackened by fire, their trunks split by axe and magic alike. Craters gaped in the earth, filled with molten sap and twitching limbs. Here, the forest had fought not just to live, but to annihilate. Mirelf stood still, watching. "This is the shattering," the hound said, when the forest's wrath was unbound. Nerith rose, hands trembling, eyes wide. She turned, and there they were, marching through the smoke, rows of elves clad in ancient war armor, their eyes devoid of mercy. Not spirits, not dream shades, memories made whole. The host of Athel Loren, bound together by vengeance. Their blades were not steel, but thorn and soul wood, etched with names of the fallen. At their front strode a war druid, whose antlers were still wet with sap, and whose mouth chanted in a voice that cracked the air itself. Nerith couldn't breathe. Then the enemy emerged. Not humans, nor dwarfs. These were something older. Chaos-warped things of flesh and brass, with teeth where their eyes should be, and limbs that moved like serpents. A tide of nightmares. The two forces collided. It wasn't a battle, it was a slaughter. The first impact sent a shockwave that knocked Nerith backward. A horned monstrosity lunged at a Treekin warrior, and the Treekin caught it in his arms, only to erupt as a spell of unmaking tore through his chest, scattering his soul into the ash. Another spirit, shaped like a willowy woman of bark and song, screamed as a jagged axe crushed her skull, her essence unraveled, vines snapping, petals scattering like dead butterflies. Nerith backed away, heart racing, but the battle surged closer. One of the chaos beasts turned its eyeless head toward her. It shouldn't see her. She wasn't part of this. But still it charged, legs pounding, mouth split wide to reveal a writhing nest of worms. She raised her staff. Too slow. Mirelt moved faster. The hound leapt, colliding midair with the monstrosity. There was no barked snarl, just the sound of impact, of bone breaking, of flesh ripping. Nerith saw it all. Mirelt's form exploded into radiant blue fire as he tore into the thing's neck, ripping sinew and corrupted arteries in a spray of black-red blood. The beast shrieked, a horrid, high-pitched wail, flailing as the spectral hound bit and tore. Flesh sloughed from its form in globs. Then Mirelt tore open its ribcage with a crunch of splintering bone. It died, finally, in a burst of steam. Nerith fell beside the carcass, breath ragged, her face slick with the thing's blood. Her hands shook as she wiped it away. She looked at Mirelt. The hound panted once, then licked his forepaws as if to erase the stain. This forest was not always wise, Mirlenth said. Once it was only wrath. Nerith stood. Around them, the battle raged on in endless loop. Spirits screamed, chaos laughed, the ground soaked in a century of agony. She turned her gaze to the war druid at the head of the elven host. His eyes locked with hers, but this wasn't a memory. He saw her. His mouth moved, slowly. "Why do you wake us?" he whispered. Then he lifted his hand, and everything collapsed. The battlefield imploded in a howl of wind and fire. Trees tore free from the earth, twisting into spirals. The ground split and bled light. And from that gaping wound something older began to crawl. Something wrong. Nerith screamed. Mirelth lunged toward her. His body became light. They vanished. Chapter 5. Gloomshade Grove. They landed hard. Nerith felt the breath wrenched from her lungs as she crashed through a tangle of damp vines and knotted branches, snapping and tearing around her like angry hands. Mirith's luminous form streaked beside her, a comet of ghostlight in the churning dark. Then, stillness. They lay at the edge of a glade cloaked in eternal twilight. Here, no sun pierced the boughs above. No stars shimmered. Just the deep, oppressive gloom of old things forgotten and left to rot. Gloomshade Grove. The air was wet and fetid, heavy with decay. Every breath Nerith took clung to her throat like mold. The trees here were malformed, withered trunks bent in agonized arcs, branches gnarled like clenched fists. Their bark was gray and flaking, seeping black sap that hissed where it touched the earth. Something had poisoned this place. Not fire, not axe, but sorrow. Nerith rose slowly, feeling the sharp sting of reopened wounds across her ribs. Blood soaked her tunic anew. Her staff buzzed weakly, its magic reluctant to stir in this place. Even the very air seemed to drag against her limbs, making each step a labor. Mirelth padded beside her, silent now, head low. "This grove was exiled," he said at last. "A memory too dark to die, too bitter to be forgotten." As they moved deeper into the gloom, shapes began to emerge from the shadows, not attacking, not moving, just watching. Eyes, dozens, hundreds, all sizes, blinking within hollows in the trees, in the roots, even inside flowers that twitched open like maws. Some glowed softly, others flickered with dying flame. All followed her. Then a sound. Not a footfall, not a branch cracking, something more visceral, a wet slither. Nerith spun just in time to see the figure emerge from the trunk of a tree, like pus from a wound. It was a spirit, or what was left of one. The form had once been elven, tall and graceful, but now it drooped like melting wax. Its limbs were too long, stretched grotesquely, the joints swollen and cracked. Its mouth gaped permanently open, from jaw to sternum, revealing a mass of thorns pulsing like a second heart inside its chest. Its hair writhed like a nest of vines, crawling with centipedes. It wept sap from its eyes. Nerith instinctively raised her staff, heart hammering. It looked at her and sang. No melody, no rhythm. Just a low, discordant moan that sank into the bones. With each note, Nerith felt the weight of sorrow pour into her soul, centuries of betrayal, of isolation, of loss. It wanted her to drown in its sadness. And for a moment she did. She saw herself alone, forgotten by the forest, her name lost, her magic consumed. She saw the trees grow over her corpse, whispering to each other that she had never mattered. She dropped her staff. The thing moved then, swiftly, silently, drawn by her weakness. Mirelth barked once, a sharp, urgent snap, and slammed into her, knocking her aside as the spirit lunged. Its claws raked through the spot where she'd stood, carving deep gouges into the roof floor. The soil shrieked. Nerith rolled, grabbed her staff and struck the ground, releasing a pulse of warding magic. The spirit shrieked in rage, not pain, but fury, its mouth leaking petals and blood. 3 more rose from the shadows. Twisted spirits, malformed and forgotten. Each bore wounds that had never healed, arrows still protruding from ghostly flesh, faces flayed half open, bark fused with bones. They came without hesitation, arms outstretched like lovers seeking an embrace. Nerith reacted on instinct. She sang a harsh, guttural spell of shattering, an old song, forbidden for how it tore not just flesh, but soul. The ground cracked. From the fissure, green flames surged upward, catching the nearest spirit mid-leap. It exploded in a burst of gore and ash, its scream lingering like a knife in the air. Another fell upon her from behind. She spun too late. Its claws found her shoulder, raking down with enough force to rip through leather and skin. She screamed, staggered, then rammed her staff backward into its face. A crunch. A squelch. It fell, hissing, dissolving into a puddle of bark pitch and teeth. The last 2 lunged together. Mirelth moved like moonlight, weaving between them, jaws snapping. One spirit's throat tore open, spraying black ichor. The other grabbed the hound by the hind leg, lifting and slamming him into a tree with a sickening crack. Aerith screamed, unleashing another pulse of energy that sent the spirit flying backward in shards of shadow. Silence fell. She dropped to her knees beside Merelt. He whimpered once, his form flickering like a failing flame. "I Stuhlgart," he whispered. She pressed her palm to his chest. "And I still walk." Then she looked up. They were surrounded. Dozens more watched from the gloom, spirits with eyes like mirrors, reflecting her own fear. But none attacked. A great root rose from the center of the grove. Upon it sat a figure of immense stillness. A woman, tall, pale, draped in vines that slithered across her limbs like living chains. Her face was smooth wood, featureless save for a mouth carved into a permanent smile. The Lady of Gloomshade. She did not move. She simply spoke, voice like rotting silk. "Aim my way of you? Have you woken my sorrow, little Spellsinger?" Aerith stood, staff in hand, blood running down her arm. "I seek the truth of Athel Loren." The smile widened, then drank of it, and the trees bled. Chapter 6. The Hollow King's Court. The trees wept blood. It dripped from their hollowed limbs, a slow, relentless seeping of red sap and memory. Aerith watched it patter to the root-knotted floor, forming rivulets that coiled like snakes between her feet. The Lady of Gloomshade was gone, faded into the folds of the grove like a sigh, but her voice still echoed in Aerith's skull. "Drink of it." She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she turned to Merelt, cradled against the twisted roots. His form flickered like a dying flame, the ghost light of his essence leaking through cracks in his translucent hide. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered. He didn't speak, only blinked once, slow, deliberate, and lowered his head. A promise of return, or a farewell. The blood rivers shifted. They surged suddenly, violently, forming a path that led deeper into the forest. Not just into shadow, but into silence. A silence so complete it crushed thought, a vacuum of memory and voice. Her feet moved without consent, drawn like iron to a lodestone. Her staff pulsed against her grip, warning her, but powerless to resist. The path led her into a hollow. An actual hollow, vast and sunken, like a crater where something massive had once slept and never woken. The trees here were skeletal, leafless, their bark pale as bone and carved with runes too ancient to be elven. They leaned in, enclosing her in a natural cathedral of deadwood. At its center sat a throne. No gold, no jewels, just gnarled roots twisted into a seat. And upon it, a figure. The Hollow King. He was more tree than man, but more corpse than either. His body was emaciated, skin shriveled tight over bone and wood. Vines burst through his ribs like a mockery of organs. His face was an old, cracked mask of bark, eyes sunken and hollow. In his lap rested a branch carved into the likeness of a child's doll, limbs broken, mouth stitched shut. Aerith approached slowly. The king did not stir. The air here was thick with memory, an oppressive weight that pressed against her chest, her bones, her soul. The moment she crossed the edge of the throne circle, her mind exploded with soundless screams. Visions stabbed through her like knives. A battlefield. A child torn in two by an orc's cleaver. A treeman betrayed by his own kin, roots pierced with iron stakes. A Spellsinger flayed alive, her magic used to feed a pyre meant to burn the spirits of the grove. All this she saw. All of it the Hollow King had watched. His voice came not from lips, but from the air itself, a dry rasp, like bark being stripped from a tree. You come seeking truth, yet you cannot bear its taste. Nyrith staggered, clutching her head. I didn't choose this. The forest called me. The forest calls many. Most are buried before they reach me. The Hollow King stood. His movement cracked like thunder. Splinters burst from his joints, sap spattering the throne. He towered above her, impossibly tall, grotesque, ancient beyond words. The truth is this, he said. Athel Loren is not your mother. She is not your sanctuary. She is not your goddess. She is a creature. She feeds on blood, on memory, on death. Nyrith shook her head, defiant. She protects. He reached out. His hand engulfed her skull, pressing his touch into her mind, and he showed her. The first rite, an ancient circle of druids offering up their own children to appease the forest. Their blood soaked into the roots, and the trees sang, not in grief, but in delight. The forming of the glades, not through peace, but war. Spirits summoned from beyond the veil, bound into servitude, treemen forced to kill their own kind to preserve the balance. She saw a Spellsinger, not unlike herself, bound in chains of song, her magic leached into the soil until she was nothing but husk and hair, her skull used as a lantern to guide others down the same path. Nyrith screamed. She ripped herself free, stumbling back, bile rising in her throat. The Hollow King lowered his hand. Now you see. She fell to her knees. Tears cut lines through the filth on her face. The weight of history bore down like a millstone. Her faith cracked. Pay me, show me this, she rasped. Why bring me here? The king tilted his head, and the mask on his face cracked further. Because you are not the forest child, you are its mirror. If it must remember through you. The ground beneath her split. Roots slithered upward, binding her ankles, her wrists, wrapping around her throat in a lover's embrace. They did not squeeze. They waited. Prove yourself, the Hollow King whispered, or become another echo. Nyrith roared. With the last strength she had, she drove her staff into the earth. Magic screamed through her. A torrent of green flame erupted from her core, incinerating the roots, tearing a shockwave through the hollow. The Hollow King stepped back, hand shielding his withered face. Nyrith rose, eyes burning like twin moons. I will carry the truth, she growled, but I will not drown in it. The Hollow King did not move, but behind his throne the trees parted. The path opened. He sat once more. Then go. And remember what you are. Nyrith limped forward, breath ragged, heart fractured, but burning. The Hollow King watched her leave. And then, alone, he wept bark. Chapter 7. The Broken Circle. Nyrith stumbled from the Hollow King's court into a realm shattered by echoes, fragments of lives long lost, torn apart and scattered like broken glass across the dreamscape. The very air thrummed with restless sorrow, and the trees here bore scars of ancient betrayals, deep gouges where bark had been peeled back like skin, and branches twisted into agonized claws reaching out to grasp at nothing. The ground beneath her feet was cracked earth, splitting open like fractured bones. Dead leaves, blackened and brittle, whispered underfoot as if murmuring the names of the fallen. The sky was a fractured mosaic of twilight and storm. Fractured clouds, bleeding streaks of crimson and ash. Nyrith's breath came ragged, her wounds from the Hollow King still burning deep beneath her ribs. But the forest's torment gnawed at her soul. She could not turn away. Ahead lay the broken circle. Once it had been a sacred glade, the heart of the Spellsinger's power, a place where the first songs were woven and life sang pure and clear. Now it was a ruin of bone and thorn. The circle was marked by shattered stone pillars, each carved with runes of binding and protection, now fractured and worn by centuries of neglect. Around them, twisted roots writhed like serpents, their bark cracked and bleeding dark resin. Between the pillars, the air shimmered with ghostly visages, phantoms of ancestors, their faces contorted in accusation and despair. Nerith's steps faltered as a voice rose from the mist, a chorus of whispers growing into bitter shouts. Her ancestors. They moved toward her in a slow, relentless tide. Some bore the jagged scars of battle. Others wore the serene masks of dead elders, their eyes hollow, mouths moving in silent judgment. "You betray us," they intoned as one, voices layered in discordant harmony. "You wield the old magics and yet falter." Nerith raised her staff, voice trembling. "I seek to save this forest." "Lies," they hissed, closing in. "You are the fracture, the broken promise, the circle shattered by your doubt." One spirit stepped forward, a tall elven woman clad in ceremonial robes, her face split by a jagged scar that pulsed with unnatural light. She lifted a spectral blade, dripping with ethereal venom. "You cannot hide behind song," she snarled. "We are the burden of your bloodline, and we will not be ignored." Nerith braced herself as the blade arced toward her. Time slowed, the edge gleaming cold and sharp as nightmare. She spun aside, but the spirit's strike tore through her sleeve, shredding flesh and exposing raw muscle beneath. Pain flared white-hot. With a cry, Nerith countered, driving her staff forward in a spiral of glowing runes. The air exploded with a thunderous roar as green flame erupted, scorching the phantom's form. The spirit shrieked, dissolving into ash and bitter smoke. But more came. Claws ripped through her back as shadowy figures lunged from the trees, wraiths of fallen kin twisted by grief and rage. Their nails bit deep, tearing flesh and drawing dark blood that hissed on contact with the magical air. Nerith gritted her teeth, voice rising in a fierce incantation. Vines erupted from the cracked earth, whipping and binding her attackers in spirals of thorned agony. The wraiths screamed, their forms unraveling under the assault. Yet the pain in her body deepened, arms slashed, ribs gashed anew. Suddenly the circle pulsed. The shattered stones trembled, glowing with a bitter light. The air thickened as ancestral power surged, equal parts condemnation and sorrow. Nerith fell to her knees, tears mingling with blood. The spirits circled, their eyes burning with unyielding fire. "You must choose," they intoned. "Yield to the forest's judgment, or become lost in the brokenness you sow." Her voice was a ragged whisper. "I am neither broken nor whole. I am the song between silence and scream." With that, she rose, gathering the last of her strength. Her staff blazed, weaving a spell that sang of renewal and defiance, a melody so pure it cleaved the wailing spirits apart. The broken circle shattered once more, but this time, shards of light pierced the gloom. Nerith stood alone in the silence that followed, the burden of her bloodline heavier than ever, but her voice clear as the dawn. Chapter 8. Mirrorroot Fen. Nerith's footsteps sank into the quaking earth of Mirrorroot Fen, each step a cautious negotiation with treacherous mud and writhing roots that clung to her ankles like desperate hands. The air was thick, humid, suffused with the sickly sweet stench of rot and decay. Above her, tangled branches wove a choking canopy, blotting out even the faintest trace of light. Bulls curled between the gnarled trunks, shifting and twisting as though alive, reflecting distorted images back at her, echoes of herself fractured in the waterlogged depths. The fen was a place of illusions and half-truths, where the forest's subconscious sprawled in tangled webs of memory and fear. Neirth's heart beat loud against the oppressive silence, a fragile drum in the choking stillness. With each hesitant step, the mirrors in the black waters rippled, revealing visions that dragged her breath away. One, her own reflection, but twisted, with a cruel smile, eyes burning with malice and despair. It whispered venomous lies. "You are unworthy. You will fail. You bring ruin." Another Nair, but with her throat torn open, blood pooling in crimson fountains across the shattered roots. Her own scream echoed, ragged and raw. She stumbled back, heart pounding. The swamp itself seemed to breathe a cold, mocking laugh. The water's surface shattered violently. From the depths rose a figure, a mirror humming of Neirth, but corrupted and broken. Skin cracked and rotted, vines strangling her limbs, eyes hollow pits leaking darkness. This doppelganger's mouth twisted into a snarling grin, revealing teeth sharp as thorns. "You cannot escape," it hissed, voice a rasp of rotting leaves. "You are the forest's curse, the song that fractures." Neirth raised her staff, fury igniting her veins. "I am the forest's hope." The twin advanced, claws extended like barbed roots. Their clash was thunderous. Wood shattered, magic flared, and spells collided with the sound of breaking glass. The corrupted twin lunged, slashing with thorned fingers that tore through Neirth's robes and skin, drawing blood that steamed where it fell. Pain flared as deep wounds blossomed across her arms and torso. But Neirth fought back with desperate grace, weaving a spell of flame and growth. Verdant fire roared, licking at her twin's flesh, peeling away bark-like skin to reveal splintered bone beneath. The doppelganger shrieked, staggering, but retaliated by summoning the fen itself. Roots erupted from the mud, wrapping around Neirth's legs and arms, squeezing with crushing force. Gritting her teeth, Neirth sang louder, voice raw but unwavering. Her magic ignited within her, a furious storm of green light and fire. With a wrenching cry, she tore free, ripping the roots apart like brittle twigs. The twin reeled, face contorted in fury and pain. It raised its hands to strike, but Neirth thrust her staff forward, unleashing a blast of pure, unyielding energy that shattered the corrupted mirror image into shards of black glass and bleeding vines. The fen grew silent. Neirth stood, drenched in sweat and blood, every breath a ragged victory. The waters around her shimmered one last time, revealing not destruction, but possibility. Within the mirrored depths, she glimpsed a future unbroken, where the forest thrived in balance, where her song mended rather than shattered. Fragile hope, but the fen had warned her. Hope here was a fragile, perilous thing, and the shadows were watching. Chapter 9. The Last Song of the Willow Witch. The air thickened as Neirth approached the edge of the glade known only in whispers as the Willow Witch's Hollow. Here the forest sighed with a breath that was equal parts sorrow and menace. The branches overhead twisted into skeletal fingers, brushing the mist in a mournful cadence, while the ground was carpeted with wilted leaves that pulsed faintly underfoot, as if breathing their last. At the center, an ancient willow tree sprawled its drooping limbs like a grieving mother. Its bark was mottled with silver streaks, slick with a dark resin that glistened like wet blood in the gloom. The tree's roots writhed beneath the soil, cracking and twisting as if alive, whispering secrets of old, forbidden magics. Neirth's every step felt heavier, the weight of countless failed spells and broken pacts pressing down on her soul. Her fingers trembled around her staff, still slick with the grime and blood of previous battles. Suddenly the Willow's limbs shuddered and parted, revealing a figure stepping forth from the shadows, a woman, ancient and otherworldly, draped in tattered robes that seemed woven from the very essence of decay. Her eyes glowed with a sickly green light, flickering like candle flames about to be snuffed. This was the Willow Witch. Her voice was a rasp, like dry leaves scraping over stone. "You come seeking power, but power always demands a price." Aerith met her gaze, steel sharpening her resolve. "I seek the last song, the spell to save the forest." The witch smiled, a curve of cracked lips, revealing blackened teeth. "Then you must sing with me. But know this, the song is forbidden for a reason. It unbinds spirits, yes, but it also rends flesh and soul. To learn it is to invite ruin." Without warning, the witch's arms flared wide, and the air exploded with a cacophony of whispered incantations. The ground beneath Neyrith twisted grotesquely, vines sprouting like serpents, coiling around her ankles and wrists with crushing strength. She struggled as the willow's roots pierced her skin, drawing blood that steamed where the bark met flesh. The witch advanced, chanting words that clawed at the edges of sanity. Her fingers traced symbols in the air, unleashing torrents of dark magic that seethed and snarled like living beasts. Shadows coalesced into jagged shapes, phantoms of pain and despair that lunged at Neyrith's mind, tearing at her memories and hopes. Aerith gritted her teeth, singing back with a voice raw and fierce, weaving light and growth against the creeping darkness. Her staff blazed with emerald fire, slicing through the spectral attackers, but the willow's roots only tightened, tearing deeper, splintering bone. The witch laughed, cruel and relentless. "Feel the price, Spellsinger. The song consumes all." Desperation surged in Neyrith's veins. With a cry, she summoned every shard of will left within her, channeling a furious spell of unmaking. The ground shattered beneath the willow, and a storm of shards, thorns, glass, and bone rained down, shredding roots and flesh alike. The witch screamed, a sound twisted with agony and rage, as her form dissolved into a swirl of leaves and ash. Neyrith collapsed, gasping, her body torn and bleeding, soul raw but alight with newfound power. She had learned the last song, and with it, the terrible choice, to heal or to destroy. Chapter 10. Fires beneath the bark. The forest was ablaze. Not the soft golden light of dawn filtering through leaves, but a searing inferno that turned trees to ash and sky to smoke. Aerith stood at the edge of this nightmare, her skin slick with sweat and soot, the acrid tang of burning wood choking her lungs. The heat pressed against her like a living beast, hungry and unrelenting. Around her, the ground was cracked and blackened, veins of molten sap oozing like blood beneath the scorched earth. The ancient trees groaned as their bark blistered and peeled away, revealing raw, trembling wood beneath, as if the forest itself was bleeding from countless invisible wounds. Ahead, a battalion of forest spirits marched through the blaze, warriors of bark and thorn, faces fierce and twisted by the firelight, their limbs armored with shards of smoldering wood. They carried weapons carved from splintered branches, their edges glowing hot enough to singe the soul. Neyrith's heart pounded as she stepped forward, staff raised high. She was a beacon of green light amid the crimson chaos, her magic weaving a fragile shield against the consuming flame. The enemy emerged from the smoke, human invaders armed with cruel blades and crueler hearts, their faces smeared with soot and bloodlust. They hacked at the forest's defenders without mercy, axes biting through bark and bone alike. The screams of spirits and men alike tore through the air, a cacophony of agony and rage. Nyrith moved into the fray. Her voice rang out, clear and commanding, as she sang the Song of Flames. Vines erupted from the scorched ground, ensnaring warriors and beasts alike, constricting with relentless force until armor cracked and flesh tore with wet, sickening sounds. She raised her staff, unleashing bursts of fiery green magic that turned axes to ash mid-swing and ignited the very air around her. One soldier charged, axe swinging wide. Nerith ducked, feeling the rush of hot steel through her hair as the blade sliced through her cloak and grazed her shoulder. Pain flared, sharp and biting, but she spun and drove her staff into the soldier's chest. The wood exploded in a blossom of emerald flames, engulfing him in a roaring inferno that left nothing but blackened bone. The battle surged around her, a tide of fire and blood. A Treekin warrior fell nearby, torn in two by a brutal cleave. His hollow eyes stared blankly as his splintered body collapsed, sap bleeding like blood from shattered bark. Nerith's breath caught at the sight, but she pushed forward. She felt the heat against her ribs where the wraith's talons had torn before. Blood slicked her side, warm and sticky, mixing with sweat and ash. But she sang on, her voice a weapon sharper than any blade, a spell that called forth the living forest itself. From the earth burst roots twisted like serpents, writhing and snapping, dragging fallen soldiers into the mud. Leaves sharpened into blades, slicing through metal and flesh with a deadly whisper. The flames around her shimmered and twisted, turning from destruction into renewal, a fiery crucible where death was but the first note of rebirth. The invaders faltered, retreating into smoke and shadow. Nyrith stood amid the smoldering battlefield, chest heaving, wounds burning, magic crackling in her veins. The forest had tasted fire beneath its bark, and it would not forget. Chapter 11. The Heart Tree Bleeds. Nyrith staggered through the charred remains of the battlefield, her body slick with sweat, blood, and the bitter ash of burned leaves. The acrid scent clung to her skin, mingling with the sharp sting of fresh wounds torn open by claw and blade. Her ribs throbbed in time with the erratic pulse of her heart, a relentless drumbeat echoing the agony of the forest itself. Ahead, the trees grew taller, their branches weaving into a vaulted cathedral of green. At the center of this sacred grove stood the Heart Tree, the ancient soul of Athel Loren, its massive trunk crowned with emerald leaves that shimmered with ethereal light. But the tree was wounded. Deep, jagged gashes tore its bark like shattered glass, oozing a thick crimson sap that spilled down its roots and pooled in the soil. The ground beneath Nyrith's feet was stained with this living blood, slick and warm. Each droplet seemed to pulse with agony, a silent scream trapped within the viscous flow. The Heart Tree's wounds bled not just sap, but memory, centuries of pain, betrayal, and despair. Nyrith approached cautiously, her staff quivering in her grasp. The air around the tree was heavy with a suffocating sorrow, a weight that pressed against her chest and threatened to crush her spirit. She reached out, trembling fingers brushing the raw bark. A sudden tremor ran through the tree, a shuddering, agonized groan that shook the leaves and sent showers of sparkling pollen into the air. The Heart Tree's branches writhed like serpents, and from its wounds sprouted twisted roots, reaching out like desperate fingers. From the shadows beneath the boughs emerged figures, spirits of the forest, their forms warped and twisted by centuries of pain. Their eyes burned with grief and rage, mouths open in silent screams that echoed through the grove. They surged toward Nerith, claws raking through the air, faces contorted with sorrow and fury. Nyrith raised her staff, voice rising in a fierce chant that wove spells of protection and healing. Vines erupted from the soil, twisting around her like a cocoon, shielding her from the onslaught. She sang of renewal, of life blossoming from death, of wounds mended and strength reborn. The spirits faltered, their cries dissolving into whispers as the vines wrapped tighter, binding them gently yet firmly. The heart tree's wounds began to glow, the crimson sap brightening to a radiant gold, seeping upward to heal the shattered bark. But the pain was not hers alone. As she wove her song, memories flooded her mind, the sacrifices of countless forest guardians, the betrayals of kin, the endless cycle of death and rebirth that defined Athel Loren. She felt each wound in her own flesh, each loss cutting deeper than any blade. With a final, shattering cry, Nerith drove her staff into the base of the heart tree. A surge of emerald light exploded outward, pulsing through the roots and branches, cleansing the wounds and binding the bleeding bark. The spirits bowed their heads, peace settling over their anguished faces. The grove sighed, the oppressive weight lifting like a veil. Nerith collapsed to her knees, exhaustion and pain flooding through her. The heart tree stood tall once more, its leaves shimmering with renewed life, but the memory of its bleeding remained etched in her soul. She had healed the forest's heart, but the scars would never fade. Chapter 12. The Song of Seasons. The forest breathed anew, but it was a breath weighed down with the burden of time, centuries folded into moments, life and death entwined like twisted vines. Nerith stood at the heart of a vast clearing, encircled by towering trees whose leaves shimmered with the colors of every season, each branch a tapestry woven from the pulse of nature itself. The air was electric, alive with unseen currents. The sky above was a swirling mosaic of shifting hues, the delicate pinks and pale blues of spring, the searing golds and vibrant greens of summer, the fiery reds and deep ambers of autumn, and the cold crystalline whites and blues of winter. It was a symphony of light and shadow, an eternal dance of change. Before her, 4 figures emerged from the shifting mists, each embodying the essence of a season, their forms both ethereal and terrifying. First came Spring, a slender woman draped in flowing robes of blossom and dew, her hair a cascade of fresh leaves and wildflowers. Her eyes gleamed with the fierce innocence of new life, yet beneath that brightness lay a hunger, a raw power barely contained. Next, Summer strode forward, a towering figure wreathed in flames of golden light and ripe fruit. His skin shimmered with sweat and pollen, muscles coiled like a predator's, eyes blazing with the heat of unrelenting days and thunderous storms. Autumn followed, her form lithe but worn, her hair the color of dying leaves that crumbled at her touch. She moved with a quiet grace, but her gaze was sharp and merciless, carrying the chill of impending endings and the scent of decay. Lastly, Winter appeared, cloaked in frost and shadow, his breath a mist of ice and snow. His eyes were voids, empty and endless, and his touch could freeze blood in veins and shatter bone with the cold of oblivion. Nerith's breath caught as they encircled her, their voices rising in a haunting chorus, a song older than the forest itself, a melody of beginnings and endings, of growth and decay, of warmth and frost. "You seek balance," Spring whispered, her voice a delicate trill, "but balance is born from chaos." Summer's roar thundered through the clearing. Strength in flame, life in destruction. You cannot tame the fire within the wild. Autumn's sigh was a cutting wind. All must fall, must wither, must die. Without death there is no renewal. Winter's cold voice echoed, hollow and unforgiving. And in the coldest dark, even the strongest falls silent. Nerith closed her eyes, the weight of their words pressing into her soul. She felt the seasons turn within her, the sweet bloom of spring's hope, the fierce heat of summer's wrath, the quiet despair of autumn's decay. and the biting chill of winter's silence. Her hands trembled as she lifted her staff, voice trembling but resolute. "I am the song between your voices, the breath between your turns, the fire that burns, even in the coldest night." With a fierce cry she sang, weaving the magic of all seasons into one harmonious spell. Vines burst from the earth, blooming with flowers of every hue, their petals shimmering with frost and dew. Flames danced along the leaves, not to burn but to warm and nourish. Leaves turned and fell in a swirling dance, nourishing the soil with their decay. Snowflakes drifted gently, crystallizing the magic and sealing it within the forest's heart. The four spirits watched, their eyes reflecting awe and acceptance. As Nerith's song reached its crescendo, the forest itself seemed to breathe with renewed life, the eternal dance of the seasons pulsing in time with her heartbeat. But beneath the beauty, a silent warning whispered on the wind. Balance was fragile, and the dance was far from over. Chapter 13. The Grove of Time. Nerith stepped into the Grove of Time, and the world shifted beneath her feet. The air was thick with an ancient magic, dense enough to taste, like honey laced with iron and dust. The towering trees here bore rings not only of age, but of memory, their trunks etched with glowing runes that pulsed in rhythmic beats, like the steady ticking of some primordial clock. The ground was a mosaic of shifting leaves and cracked bark, endlessly changing beneath her steps, autumn's fiery reds giving way to spring's tender greens, then winter's icy blues melting into summer's molten gold. Time in this grove was not a straight path, but a swirling vortex, folding past, present, and future into one tangled tapestry. Ahead, standing in a circle, were four figures, spirits from the realm beyond, cloaked in shifting veils of light and shadow, each radiating a different potential fate for Athel Loren. The first spirit was draped in soft green, eyes shining with gentle hope. Around her the forest bloomed, trees thick with fruit, streams clear and singing, creatures of all kinds thriving in harmony. The air hummed with peace and prosperity. The second spirit was clad in vibrant crimson and gold, radiating fierce energy. Around him the forest burned bright, wildfires racing through ancient woodlands, smoke thick in the air, spirits wailing and warriors charging into battle. Athel Loren was alive with conflict, raw and unforgiving. The third spirit was veiled in ash and shadow, a cold whisper in the air. Around her the forest lay in ruin, blackened stumps and smoldering earth, twisted creatures twisted by sorrow, silence swallowing the cries of the fallen. The future was one of decay and desolation. The last spirit was cloaked in swirling mist, face hidden. Around him the forest shimmered with possibility, neither thriving nor dying, a fragile balance hanging on a knife's edge. The air was heavy with uncertainty. Nerith's heart pounded as she moved toward the center, the weight of these visions pressing down like a mountain. The spirits spoke, their voices overlapping in a haunting harmony. Choose your path. Which future will you weave? Will the forest rise or fall? Nerith closed her eyes, the visions flooding her mind, the laughter of children beneath the canopy, the clash of blades on bark, the whispers of ghosts long dead, the fragile first green shoots pushing through ash. She could feel the pulse of the forest in every choice, the hope, the fury, the despair, the uncertainty. Her voice was a bare thread, but steady. The forest is all these things, and none. It is change itself. She opened her eyes, the spirits nodded, and the grove shimmered. Time stretched and folded again, the future branching like roots beneath the soil. Nerith stepped forward, embracing the tangled fate of Athel Loren, ready to walk the path she must forge, a path neither foretold nor forgotten. Chapter 14. The Labyrinth of the Moon Deer. Nyrith's breath caught as she stepped beyond the shimmering veil, into the twisting maze known as the Labyrinth of the Moon Deer. The air here was thick with the scent of damp earth and crushed leaves, heavy with the quiet murmur of hidden things. Twilight reigned eternal beneath a sky mottled with silver stars, their light barely penetrating the dense canopy woven from intertwined branches and ghostly vines. The labyrinth was alive, a breathing, shifting entity that coiled around her like a serpent, paths folding and unraveling with deceptive ease. The ground beneath her feet was soft and moss-covered, but the shadows seemed to deepen and thicken with every step. Somewhere, distant and elusive, the haunting melody of deer bells tinkled faintly, a sound both sweet and sinister. Nyrith's staff glowed softly, casting flickering light that danced on the bark walls, lined with ancient runes, their meanings lost in the ebbing memory of the forest. She felt eyes, countless and unseen, watching her from the darkness, the breath of the forest's subconscious, the dreams and fears of the trees themselves. Suddenly, from the mist stepped a great stag, its coat shimmering like the surface of a moonlit lake. Its antlers branched wide, entwined with glowing fungi and silver leaves. The deer's eyes, deep pools of luminous white, met Nyrith's with ancient wisdom and inscrutable challenge. The stag bowed its head slowly, inviting her deeper into the maze. As Nyrith followed, the labyrinth shifted. Paths closed behind her, new corridors opening where none had been. The walls seemed to pulse, whispering secrets in a language older than words. Then came the test. From the shadows emerged figures, illusions of those she had loved and lost, faces blurred and shifting, childhood friends long forgotten, fallen kin, the Spellsingers who had perished before her time. Their voices called out, sweet and cruel, tempting her to turn back, to abandon the journey. But these phantoms were twisted, shadows beneath shadows. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too dark, their hands reaching to drag her into the eternal night. Nyrith raised her staff, voice ringing clear and true as she sang the Song of Warding. A blast of green light shattered the illusions, sending them shrieking into the mist like broken glass. But the labyrinth was not done. Roots burst from the earth, twisting into serpentine forms that snapped at her ankles and wrists, seeking to bind and drag her down into the choking soil. Their bark was sharp as razors, cutting deep, drawing lines of burning blood. Pain flared hot and sharp as Nyrith struggled, her voice rising in a fierce incantation. She called upon the power of the moon, weaving silver threads of magic that danced around her limbs, slicing through the grasping roots with the hiss of burning sap. The stag reappeared, guiding her with calm, unyielding grace through the maze's final turns. Its presence steadied her, a beacon in the twisting dark. At last Nyrith burst through the last wall of vines and shadows, emerging into a clearing bathed in pure, unfiltered moonlight. The air was cold but clean, the silence profound. She lowered her staff, heart pounding. The labyrinth of the moon deer had tested her soul and found it unbroken. But the path ahead was still shrouded in shadow and the forest's secrets deeper than ever. Chapter 15. Whispering Bones. The clearing beyond the labyrinth of the moon deer was a graveyard of whispers, a place where the forest's long-dead guardians and fallen creatures lingered in restless silence. Nyrith stepped cautiously among the scattered bones, ancient and bleached white, half buried beneath moss and twisted roots that seemed to clutch at the fragments as though unwilling to relinquish their hold. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and decay, mingled with the faint metallic tang of dried blood. Shadows pooled thick between the skeletal remains, dancing with flickers of ghostly light that flickered and faltered like dying embers. As Nerith moved deeper, the bones began to shift and murmur, voices rising in a chorus of lost memories and unfulfilled vengeance. Faces of fallen warriors, their flesh long rotted away, materialized as spectral forms, hollow-eyed, silent, but filled with a burning desire for release. The spirits encircled her, their presence both mournful and menacing. One stepped forward, a treekin warrior, his bark cracked and splintered, ribs broken, heartwood exposed and bleeding a sap as dark as ink. His eyes, deep pools of sorrow, fixed on Nerith with a piercing gaze. "Do you walk among the forgotten?" he asked, voice like the grinding of ancient stone. Nerith's throat tightened. "I seek to heal the forest's wounds." The spirit's hollow laugh was like wind through dry leaves. "Healing comes with blood. Do you understand the price?" Suddenly the ground trembled. From the earth burst roots twisted like serpents, dragging the bones of fallen beasts and warriors into grotesque forms. The forest's dead were rising, not to rest, but to judge. Nerith barely dodged as a skeletal stag lunged, antlers crashing down with the force of falling trees. She raised her staff, chanting a spell of protection, weaving shields of emerald flame that flickered against the assault. More spirits surged, their ethereal claws tearing at her flesh, leaving wounds that burned with cold fire. Blood mixed with sap as she fought, the pain raw and biting, every strike a reminder of the forest's relentless fury. She sang back with a voice raw and fierce, calling upon the spirits of life to bind the restless dead. Vines erupted, wrapping around the spectral forms, holding them in coils of green fire. The bones cracked and splintered as the magic tightened, the spirits' screams fading into whispered pleas. As silence settled, Nerith knelt among the bones, her hands trembling as she touched the earth. The weight of countless lives pressed upon her, a reminder that the past was never truly dead. With a final song, she offered peace to the forgotten, a promise that their sacrifice would not be in vain. The spirits faded, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves and the steady pulse of the living forest. Nerith rose, battered but unbroken, carrying the whispers of the bones within her soul. Chapter 16. Roots Beyond Death. Nerith's descent began beneath the forest floor, slipping through a veil of tangled roots and earth thick with ancient memory. The world above faded into a muffled whisper, replaced by the dense, loamy scent of soil and decay. Darkness enveloped her like a shroud, oppressive and complete, broken only by faint glimmers of phosphorescent fungi, clinging to gnarled roots that twisted like serpents into the black abyss. Each step downward sent a shudder through the ground, as if the very earth sighed beneath her weight. The air grew colder, damp with the breath of forgotten things. She could feel it. This was no mere subterranean passage, but the underworld of Athel Loren, the root womb where the spirits of the dead and the ancient forest gods slumbered in uneasy silence. The walls pulsed with life, sinewy roots crawling across the rock-like veins, slick with sap that gleamed red as fresh blood. Every heartbeat reverberated through the cavernous hollow, echoing in her chest like the distant drums of war. Nerith's fingers brushed against the damp bark of a massive root. It shuddered beneath her touch, and from it erupted a vision, a searing, vivid flood of memories. She saw the birth of the forest gods, towering figures wreathed in vines and leaf, bodies carved from living wood and ancient stone. They rose from the fertile darkness, their eyes burning with primordial fire. Their hands shaped the land, weaving life from death and death from life, forging a delicate balance in the wild world. But the vision twisted. The gods clashed, their limbs splintering in titanic struggles. Thunderous roars shook the earth as they tore at each other with fists of bark and bone. The cavern trembled as roots were shattered, bloodied sap spraying like waterfalls, staining the dark earth crimson. From the chaos emerged a monstrous form, a god twisted by rage and betrayal. Its bark cracked and oozing poison, eyes blazing with fury. It slew its kin, tearing through sacred groves and sundering the bonds of life. Nerith gasped, stumbling back as the vision faded, leaving a lingering scent of burnt resin and iron. The path narrowed, forcing her through a tunnel woven from living roots that pulsed like the veins of some colossal beast. The roots tightened, threatening to crush her, but she sang a low chant, weaving a shield of emerald light that flared and held the crushing grasp at bay. Ahead, the cavern opened into a vast chamber, a cathedral of stone and wood where ancient forest gods lay entwined in endless slumber. Their colossal forms were part tree, part beast, their bodies scarred and broken but still pulsing with faint life. Moss and flowers bloomed on their skin, and in the silence their breath stirred the air like a gentle breeze. But not all was peaceful. From the shadows slithered twisted shapes, corrupted spirits born of pain and bitterness, clawing at the sleeping gods with jagged limbs and teeth sharp as shards of obsidian. Their whispers were poison, their touch a blight that spread like wildfire through the roots. Nerith raised her staff, voice rising in a fierce incantation. Vines erupted from the chamber floor, writhing and striking with relentless fury, tearing the corrupted spirits apart in a storm of splintered wood and green flame. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning resin and shattered bark. The battle was brutal and unforgiving. Roots snapped and bloodied saps sprayed like rain. Nerith's skin was torn by thorns and claws, her breath ragged as she fought to defend the sacred slumber of the gods. Finally silence fell. The corrupted spirits lay broken and scattered, their poison purged by the forest's wrath. Nerith knelt before the largest of the gods, placing her hands on its ancient bark. She sang a song of healing, weaving light and life into the shattered wounds. The god's eyes flickered open, glowing with renewed fire, and its voice rumbled like thunder beneath the earth. "Child of the forest," it said, "you have walked the roots beyond death. You carry the burden of our slumber and the hope of new life." Nerith bowed her head, heart heavy but alight with purpose. The underworld breathed once more, alive with the pulse of ancient power. And she was its guardian. Chapter 17. The Mask of the Green Laugher. The cavern's shadows twisted and warped as Nerith moved deeper into the heart of the forest's underworld. The air grew thick with a pungent scent of earth and wild herbs, a scent both intoxicating and foreboding. The walls here pulsed with the heartbeat of the ancient woods, but beneath the surface lurked something far older, a trickster's mirth wrapped in veils of darkness and light. Ahead, a figure awaited her in a clearing illuminated by eerie green flames that danced upon gnarled roots like mischievous spirits. The figure wore a mask, carved of bark and polished emerald, twisted into a grotesque smile frozen in time. The eyes behind the mask gleamed with wild laughter, sharp and cold. This was the Green Laugher, the forest's ancient trickster god, a being who thrived on chaos, riddles, and cruel mirth. Nerith's voice barely rose above a whisper. "I have come to learn the truth." The Laugher's laughter exploded, echoing off the cavern walls, a sound like cracking branches and shattering glass, both beautiful and terrifying. "Truth," the voice teased, playful and sharp. "Truth is a many-faced thing, child. Shall I tell you riddles, or shall we dance in the dark?" Without warning, the Lafa sprang forward, limbs bending impossibly, movements too fast for eyes to follow. His hands were branches ending in thorns sharper than blades, and they tore into the earth with wild abandon. Nairith barely dodged, feeling the sting of thorns grazing her cheek, ripping fabric and skin. Blood blossomed crimson, hot and stinging. She retaliated with a flash of green flame slicing through the Lafa's form, but he shattered into a flurry of leaves and bark, reforming behind her with a grin wider than before. "Catch me if you can," he taunted, weaving between shadows, his laughter a maddening melody. The cavern twisted into a labyrinth of illusions, walls growing and shrinking, floors turning to quicksand, ceilings dripping with sap that burned like acid. Nairith's senses spun. Her reflection fractured in pools of water and shards of glass. The Lafa's voice whispered riddles into her mind, teasing her fears and hopes, unraveling her resolve. Who sings the song that ends all songs? What leaf falls not in the storm? When does the forest laugh? Nairith's breath came fast, heart pounding like a war drum. She forced herself to focus, anchoring her spirit in the deep roots of the forest's heart. With a cry, she sang a counterspell, a binding song woven from the oldest magic of growth and decay. Vines erupted, lashing out like serpents, wrapping around the Lafa's form. His laughter twisted into a scream of rage as the emerald mask cracked, revealing eyes wild and furious beneath. But the trickster was not so easily caught. With a final burst of wild magic, he shattered the bonds and vanished into the shadows with a mocking bow. Nairith sank to her knees, chest heaving, wounds burning fiercely where the thorns had torn. Her voice trembled but rose again, a whisper carried on the wind. The forest laughs because it must, because it lives, because without laughter, even the greenest leaf would rot. The cavern grew still, the green flames dimming to embers. Nairith knew then that the Lafa's tests were far from over, and that the forest's heart was a wild, untamable thing, both cruel and beautiful. She rose, wounded but unbroken, ready to face whatever riddles the forest would throw next. Chapter 18. The Choice of Flame or Seed. The air thickened as Nairith entered the Heartfire clearing, a place where the forest's deepest contradictions collided in blazing fury and tender growth. The ground beneath her feet was scorched black, cracked like shattered glass, yet from these wounds sprouted tiny emerald shoots trembling with life. Around her, towering trees burned with flames that did not consume, but danced like living spirits, casting flickering shadows that twisted and writhed with ancient purpose. In the center stood two colossal pillars, one a roaring column of fire, blazing with wild, unpredictable energy, the other a great tree of luminous green, its branches heavy with glowing seeds, pulsing with raw potential. A voice, both ancient and eternal, whispered through the flames and leaves. "You stand at the crossroads, child of the forest," it said. "To choose the flame is to awaken wrath, destruction, and rebirth through fire's cleansing fury. To choose the seed is to sow patience, growth, and healing, yet risk decay and stagnation. Which path will you walk?" Naith's heart thundered in her chest as she faced the fiery pillar. Flames licked the sky, wild and hungry, their roar a battle cry that echoed the wars the forest had waged and lost. She felt the heat scorch her skin, the fire's touch burning away doubt and fear, but threatening to consume all that was gentle and pure. Turning to the seed tree, she saw the soft glow of life's promise. Each seed a world waiting to bloom, fragile yet resilient. But beneath its beauty lurked the threat of rot, the slow choke of death masked as patience. From the shadows stepped spirits of past spellsingers, their faces etched with sorrow and resolve. One stepped forward, a woman with hair like autumn leaves, eyes deep pools of wisdom and warning. "Choose too hastily, and you will burn the forest to ash," she said softly. "Choose too slowly, and the forest will wither beneath the weight of time." Suddenly the clearing erupted in chaos. From the fires burst twisted creatures of flame and shadow, blazing wolves with jaws of molten rock, serpents coiling with tongues of fire. They lunged at Nerith, claws tearing through flesh and magic alike, their bites scorching with unnatural heat. Their growls shattered the air, a symphony of destruction. At the same moment, from the roots of the seed tree emerged corrupted dryads, their skin cracked like parched earth, eyes glowing with sickly green venom. They swiped and clawed, their twisted branches breaking bone and rending muscle with sickening snaps. Nerith's body burned with pain as she fought on both fronts, wounds opening and bleeding sap mingled with blood. She sang with desperate fury, weaving spells of green flame and sharp thorns that lacerated her foes and shielded her from the relentless assault. The fire creatures howled as vines wrapped around them, flames sputtering and dying in emerald light. The corrupted dryads shrieked, roots bursting through their cracked skin to drag them back into the earth's dark embrace. Breathing heavily, Nerith stepped between the two pillars, blood and sap dripping from her torn robes. She touched the flame, a searing heat that blazed through her veins, igniting her spirit. Then she touched the seed, a gentle pulse of life that steadied her breath and calmed the raging fire within. Her voice rose, a song of balance and choice. "I am both flame and seed, destruction and growth, the forest's fury and its patience." The pillars shuddered, flames and leaves swirling together in a tempest of light and shadow. The clearing settled into quiet, the air pulsing with renewed life and fierce promise. Nerith knew the path forward was not one or the other, but the impossible harmony of both. The choice had been made, but the journey was only beginning. Chapter 19. Awakening the Song. Nerith stood alone in the heart of the forest's soul, a place where reality blurred and magic flowed like molten silver through the veins of the earth. The air thrummed with a wild electric energy, and the trees around her swayed not with wind, but with the pulse of an awakening power. Her body was bruised and torn, skin streaked with sap and blood, every breath a ragged battle between exhaustion and resolve. Before her stretched the vast canopy of the heart tree, its branches like great arms reaching skyward, leaves shimmering with every hue of green and gold. Its wounds, deep gashes from ages past, glowed faintly. A wound that was both ancient and fresh, bleeding not only sap but the very essence of the forest's spirit. Nerith lifted her staff, the wood alive beneath her fingers, humming in tune with her heartbeat. Her voice trembled, raw and broken, as she began to sing, the first notes fragile as newborn light, then rising with fierce determination. The song was old and new all at once, woven from every trial she had faced, every pain she had endured, every hope she dared to hold. As she sang, the forest responded. Roots trembled, creeping like waking serpents from the soil, wrapping around the wounded bark, knitting flesh and wood together with threads of glowing emerald light. The air shimmered, alive with swirling motes of magic that coalesced into luminous figures, spirits of long-forgotten guardians, their eyes shining with gratitude and sorrow. But the awakening was not gentle. From the depths of the heart tree, a roar erupted, a sound like thunder crashing through leaves and stone. The tree convulsed, limbs twisting and breaking, shards of splintered wood flying like daggers. Blood-red sap sprayed outward, soaking Nerith's robes and skin with its acrid sting. Pain flared through her chest, sharp and searing, as if the very core of her being was being torn apart and remade. Her voice cracked, then strengthened, carrying the song into the roaring heart of the forest. Figures emerged from the shadows. corrupted spirits twisted by centuries of neglect and rage. Their forms were grotesque, bark flaking away to reveal jagged bone and thorned sinew. They lunged at Nerith, claws slashing with merciless fury, eyes burning with hatred. She fought with every ounce of strength left in her, weaving spells of fire and growth, light and shadow. The air exploded with magic, flames roared and vines lashed, cutting and binding the corrupted spirits, tearing through flesh and wood with savage precision. Blood and sap mingled as she battled, the scent of earth and smoke thick in her lungs. A corrupted wraith clawed her side, tearing through skin and muscle, sending shockwaves of pain radiating through her body. Nerith screamed, unleashing a surge of green fire that incinerated the wraith in a burst of crackling energy. The fight was brutal, raw, and desperate, but as her song reached its crescendo, the corrupted spirits faltered, dissolving into ash and light. Silence fell. Nerith collapsed to her knees, breath ragged, body trembling. The heart tree stood tall and whole, its wounds sealed with shimmering light, its leaves singing softly in the newly awakened breeze. She raised her eyes to the canopy, voice barely above a whisper. The forest lives. And with that, the song of awakening echoed through Athel Loren, a promise of rebirth and fierce, unyielding life. Chapter 20. Return to the Living Glade. Nerith's eyes fluttered open, the world around her shimmering like a waking dream. She lay on the mossy floor of Athel Loren's heart, a glade bathed in the soft golden light of dawn, where leaves sparkled with dew and the air was thick with the scent of earth and new beginnings. The wounds on her body throbbed, some still bleeding, sap mingled with blood, her skin slick with sweat and dirt, yet the pain was tempered by a fierce warmth blossoming deep within her chest, the fierce pulse of life reclaimed. Around her the forest stirred as if awakening from a long and troubled slumber. Trees bent slightly, their massive limbs bowing in silent greeting. Leaves rustled in a whispered chorus, and somewhere a bird sang a clear, hopeful note that cracked the silence like a promise. Nerith pushed herself upright, her body aching but resolute. The staff she carried, once a simple branch, now glowing with ancient power, felt like an extension of her very soul. She surveyed the glade, its edges humming with energy, shadows retreating beneath the growing light. But the forest's rebirth was not unchallenged. From the depths of the woods came a roar, a sound both primal and terrible. A great beast emerged, towering and fierce, its eyes burning with wild fury. Its fur was matted with blood and brambles, muscles rippling beneath scarred skin. It bore the marks of battle, deep gashes where claws had torn, broken antlers bloodied and cracked. The beast charged. Nerith stood her ground, heart pounding as she raised her staff. She sang, a fierce, ancient melody weaving through the air like a blade. Vines erupted from the earth, twisting and snapping with savage strength, entwining the beast's limbs. It struggled, roaring in frustration, jaws snapping mere inches from her face. She pressed forward, voice rising in a crescendo of power. Emerald flames burst from her fingertips, licking at the creature's flesh, cauterizing wounds and forcing it back. The battle was raw and brutal, each strike a clash of life and death, fury and grace. When the beast finally collapsed, subdued but alive, Nerith knelt beside it, placing a gentle hand on its heaving side. Her voice softened, singing a song of healing and peace, binding the broken creature's wounds with threads of glowing magic. As the beast calmed, its eyes met hers, wildness yielding to trust. Around them the forest seemed to breathe anew. Spirits stirred in the shadows, their forms flickering like candlelight. New shoots pushed through the soil, bursting into bloom with vibrant colors. The air pulsed with the heartbeat of life itself. Nerith rose, every scar and bruise a testament to the journey she had endured. The forest had not only called her, it had transformed her. She was no longer just a Spellsinger. She was a living song, a promise of renewal and fierce protection. The trees bowed slightly once more, leaves shimmering like stars. Athel Loren had begun a new age, and Nerith, its guardian, would sing its story for all time.